Hello and a very happy new year. Welcome to this brand new edition of World Panorama in 2016. I'm your host Frank Pereira. Through the next half an hour, I'll take you through some of the biggest stories across the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. Saudi Arabia-Iran ties hit new low as Saudi executes Shia cleric Sheikh al-Nimr amid sectarian tensions. Saudi embassy in Iran stormed, resulting in Riyadh snapping diplomatic ties. Tensions deepen in the Middle East crisis. Censure and condemnation pour in from around the world as isolated North Korea carries out a hydrogen bomb test. UN mulls fresh sanctions as a defiant Kim Jong-un boxes move. Chinese stock markets plummet twice in the week amid concerns over China's swooning currency, economic slowdown and falling oil prices. Markets around the world crash with longer terms concern for global investors. And US President Barack Obama makes a passionate call for a national sense of urgency to limit gun violence. He passes an executive order that seeks to close background check loopholes. The opposition and gun manufacturers dismissed the move as toothless and violating. Well, let's begin with our top story this week. It's been a bad start to the new year in West Asia, with Iran and Saudi Arabia tensions peaking following execution of a Shia cleric. After protesters attacked the Saudi embassy in Tehran, the two sides have snapped diplomatic ties and air links. Shia-Sunni sectarian strife in both nations threatens to blow up and augurs ill for the already volatile region. Here's more.
First, the spark. On January 2nd, Saudi Arabia announces it has executed Shia cleric Sheikh al-Nimr among 47 dissidents and al-Qaeda militants. And then the backlash. The next day, outraged protesters in Shia-majority Iran set ablaze part of the Saudi embassy in Tehran. Iran's top leader cites human rights violations, slams Saudi Arabia for mayhem in Yemen, Syria and other parts of the Middle East, warning of divine revenge.
Spilled blood will undoubtedly bring retribution. Saudi politicians, rulers and policymakers should have no doubt that there will be divine vengeance for this blood. God Almighty will not pardon those who spill the blood of the innocent.
Riyadh hit back too with accusations of Tehran supporting terror. Saudi Arabia snaps diplomatic ties with Iran, recalls embassy staff with immediate effect. The embassy has been shut down. The tentative, long-fraught peace between the two crumbles rapidly.
We are determined not to allow Iran to undermine our security. We are determined not to let Iran mobilize or create or establish terrorist cells in our country or in the countries of our allies.
And it's blown up big from there, casting further dark clouds over the entire Middle East, with strong sectarian divides visible. Protests by Shias rage across East Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq and Turkey. Besides diplomatic ties, Saudi Arabia also decided to break all air links with Iran. UAE recalled its ambassador from Iran and downgraded diplomatic ties. Sudan and Bahrain announced a complete severing of diplomatic ties with Iran. Then there's internal unrest in Shia-dominated eastern Saudi Arabia. Iraq too condemned Saudi actions. Saudi Arabia announced an end to its unilateral ceasefire against Houthis in war-torn Yemen.
More recently, there have been direct concerns raised by U.S. officials to Saudi officials about the potential damaging consequences of following through on the execution, on mass executions, in particular the execution of al-Nimr, the political opposition figure, but also the religious leader. And this is a concern that we raised with the Saudis in advance. Unfortunately, the concerns that we expressed to the Saudis have precipitated the kinds of consequences that we were concerned about.
Experts point out that rising tensions and deepening divides in the Middle East could mean lack of cohesion among nations fighting the Islamic State and the terror menace, with interest working at cross purposes. This cohesion is also essential to resolving conflicts in Yemen and Syria. Fears arise of that being pushed further away. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
And joining me for a chat this week to talk about this very subject is Raghubansh, Sinha, Deputy News Editor of the Hindustan Times. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. Let's talk about this particular crisis. The already volatile situation in the Middle East only seems to have gotten worse with the execution of the Shia cleric in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, it has really, situation has got worsened, and the real issue of concern is that the two countries, Saudi Arabia and Iran, who were key to finding solution to most of the problems in the region, now are at loggerheads. In fact, they have broken off all diplomatic ties, and the result is that all their allies, say for example the Gulf Cooperation Council, all have lined up behind Saudi Arabia, and all the major Shia powers have lined up behind Iran. So the issue is that the future in the next few months looks very bleak, that none of the problems can get solved because without the cooperation of these two. And number two, Saudi-Iran tussle has its own global ramification.
Indeed.
And that itself will come out to play, excuse me, and that will also impact several other regions of the world, including India.
Talking about global ramifications, we've already seen the first signs of it. Oil prices have gone to an all-time low. We've not seen a low like this in the last 1 decade or so. So that, of course, is the first things.
Yes, that is the economic fallout. And at the same time, there was some hope that with the nuclear deal between the main major powers and Iran, there was a chance that we will be able to moderate the behavior of Iran. And the end of isolation of Iran would encourage it to become more and more moderate like any other normal country. Now, it is a setback for moderate leaders like President Hassan Rouhani, and the hardliners in Iran. They may now call the shot because, they will be able to influence public opinion because, you see the storming of the Saudi Arabian embassy. Now, these are not normal kind of behavior. It will inflame relation across the region.
Indeed. Could this situation have been averted? Do you think that the Americans should have pressurized the Saudis into not executing this Shia cleric, and maybe something could have been done then?
Well, yes, that should have been avoided. But you see, the Saudi Arabian leadership, they are not very happy with the end of isolation of Iran. And when Iran has come back to the mainstream, they are very apprehensive about the future role of Iran in the various crises. Because their rivalry is very old. So actually the Saudi leadership wanted to make an example of cleric al-Nimr. But I think it was a very bad step, and it will inflame relation in the region. But you see, it's a very difficult situation for the American leadership, because on the one hand, Obama administration was bent upon having a deal with Iran so that as to end the isolation of Iran. On the other hand, Saudi Arabian leadership was putting a lot of pressure on the American leadership not to have such a deal. So I think the American leadership was also caught in between. And so they really didn't have the time to look at these very small issues, which, works on its own dynamics in the region.
Indeed, but a direct conflict, a direct war between Iran and Saudi Arabia, of course, doesn't seem like it's likely to happen anytime in the near future. But what's likely to happen is the proxy conflict that's going to play out in the Middle East. Yemen, there's so many other countries there, of course, where both sides are supporting different leaders there within those particular countries. So that's going to continue, isn't it?
Well, direct war is totally ruled out because it is not in their interest. They haven't gone to war directly because basically this is a proxy war.
Yes.
And what we have been seeing over the last decade or so, the problem in the region is the result of the proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And now that problem, whether it is Yemen, whether it is Bahrain, whether it is Syria or Iraq, all this problem will deepen much further, and finding a solution to this problem will become very, very difficult now.
Indeed. And you know, who stands to lose the most out of this conflict? Is it Saudi Arabia or is it Iran or is it both put together?
Well, I think everyone stands to lose in this whole crisis which is taking place. But the main loser, number one, is the Iranian new leadership under Hassan Rouhani. They wanted to come back, have normal trade with the region because the economy is in bad shape. They have been isolated literally for over 2 decades. And they were hoping that they will influence the politics of the region. So they are the number one loser. Then you also have the hardliners in the region. They have really benefited out of this by having Iran and Saudi Arabia at each other's throat. They will benefit out of it. Then you also have the various terrorist group, whether it's the Islamic State, whether it is the Al-Qaeda, whether it is the different offshoots of the different terrorist organization, the Taliban. They would be very happy because now their whole game plan of keeping the region in turmoil and basing their whole politics on the religious strife, on religious basis, will have more appeal, they will get more recruits, and they will be able to justify their war based on these kind of sectarian strife.
Indeed. We'll have to wait and watch and see what exactly the war is going to be like, or the proxy war is going to be like in the region, and how exactly it plays out. Thank you so much, Raghubansh, Sinha, for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, on that note, of course, we'll slip into a short break now, but still to come. The Syrian government has finally allowed UN aid to move into besieged parts of the war-struck country. People are reported to be dying of starvation in the worst-hit areas. We'll have that and much more on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, let's now get to the other big story this week. North Korea's shock announcement of a hydrogen bomb test triggered global concern and condemnation, with the UN and several other nations mulling a stronger sanctions crackdown. The latest test provides unnerving proof of North Korea's claimed commitment to developing an advanced nuclear weapons capability, termed by arch-rival South Korea as a grave provocation.
A low-intensity earthquake, a TV announcement vowing to take on what it called US aggression, to low enthusiasm applause from North Koreans. On the morning of 6th of January, the DPRK claimed it conducted an underground hydrogen bomb test. The shock and the waves created went much further. Arch-rivals South Korea and the US calling it a grave provocation that would get a befitting response. Even North Korea's allies China and Russia held out condemnation and concern.
We strongly urge North Korea to honor its commitment to denuclearization, stop taking any action that could cause the situation to deteriorate. Maintaining peace and stability on the peninsula is in line with the common interests of the relevant sides. China will firmly promote the denuclearization objective on the peninsula, realize and resolve nuclear issues on the peninsula under the framework of 6-party talks. Now our government has to take decisive measures against any additional provocations by North Korea and work with the international community to make sure that the isolated country pays the price for its latest nuclear test.
Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un had signed a handwritten order from the test himself, proclaiming it a sign of his country's greatness. Similar outrage and sanction threats had greeted the North's previous tests in 2006, 2009 and 2013. Work is underway towards a fresh UNSC resolution.
This act is profoundly destabilizing for regional security and seriously undermines international non-proliferation efforts. I condemn it unequivocally.
The members of the Security Council also recalled that they have previously expressed their determination to take further significant measures in the event of another DPKR nuclear test, and in line with this commitment and the gravity of the situation of this violation, the members of the Security Council will begin to work immediately on such measures in a new Security Council resolution.
US and South Korean defense chiefs met on the course of action, agreeing to work on customized deterrent strategies and push ahead with joint military drills. The alert against Pyongyang hits the next level.
Whatever this event was, whether it was a hydrogen bomb or something less than that, it all works towards their goal of making smaller, more efficient weapons that they can then put on top of missiles.
There is no real clarity on what form the sanctions might take or when the package would be drawn up. All eyes now on China, a veto-wielding UNSC Council member, to see just how far it will go in tightening the sanctions grip on its recalcitrant neighbor. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Moving on now, a collapse in China's ailing stock market spread like contagion across the globe again this week, pummeling nervous investors looking for respite from the week's rocky trading. Chinese stocks traded for less than 30 minutes on Thursday, slumping 7% and triggering the second emergency market closure this week. The action prompted markets in Europe to retreat and then spread to the United States, where stocks tumbled 2%. Market confidence was dented early on Thursday by a sharp devaluation in the Chinese currency, which was interpreted as a sign that the authorities are becoming increasingly rattled about the nation's ailing economy. Weak economic data had sent share prices plunging on Monday too. The fallout from China's slowing economy is likely to be felt more deeply in Europe than in the United States. Still, the market turmoil is a reminder of how interconnected the United States is to the global economy.
I think a lot of this week's market turmoil, particularly the disruption in the middle to latter part of the week, was very much linked to the devaluation of the yuan. And that really is what caused the market disruption back last August. So there's a lot of concern about the China slowdown. There's a concern about this devaluation and what it really signals with respect to an economy that many investors are already uncertain about the actual rate of growth. And so there is a direct linkage in terms of this dislocation to what transpired last August.
Meanwhile, US President Barack Obama took the first steps this week towards tighter gun control laws in the US. An executive order laying down stringent checks on arms sellers and buyers comes in the backdrop of a slew of recent psychotic gun attacks across the US. But the opposition and powerful gun lobby have raised strong question marks on the legal validity of the order in the absence of support from Congress. Here's more.
Sirens, ambulances, blood and gore. The victims, school children and teachers. Innocent bystanders, cinema audiences. In 2015 alone, the US saw 353 mass shootings, 62 of them at schools. Newtown, Aurora, Santa Barbara, it's a long list. Worse perhaps, in 20 of them, tighter gun laws could have prevented the killers from obtaining guns. Many of the killers who got the guns legally already had criminal records. President Obama's earlier effort at gun control laws had failed. This time, he tries through the executive order route.
Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day. So, all of us need to demand a Congress brave enough to stand up to the gun lobby's lies. All of us need to stand up and protect its citizens.
Under the new plan to curb the rising gun menace, all gun sellers must be registered as dealers and must conduct background checks on prospective buyers. Current exemptions will be removed on online and gun shoe sellers. States must provide information on people disqualified due to mental illness or domestic violence. FBI to increase workforce processing background checks by 50%. And Congress will be asked to invest $500 million to improve access to mental health care. Aware that the order goes against gun-holding rights and the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, Obama stressed on rights to a free and safe life without constant fear of a gun user gone wayward, urging Congress to look beyond what he calls the powerful U.S. gun lobby.
So the gun lobby may be holding Congress hostage right now, but they cannot hold America hostage. We do not have to accept this carnage as the price of freedom.
But the opposition that dominates Congress is far from buying Obama's authority to introduce such an order in the first place. Though Democrat presidential candidate Hillary Clinton praised the move, her Republican counterparts rubbish it as little more than a political gimmick.
Just wants to sign executive orders all the time. No good. It's no good. It's no good. It's no fair, and they're not going to screw around with the Second Amendment, okay? It's not going to happen. So that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
The president doesn't have the authority to do it. If there's an issue related to federal gun laws, then he ought to go to Congress and try to forge consensus to make it happen. He doesn't have this power.
Any signs of implementation will have to get through the U.S. law courts first. The opposition and gun manufacturers have already challenged Obama's right to overrule the Second Amendment. But at least it's a step forward, raising hope of a route to stop the U.S. gun culture carnage that blazes out of control. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Moving on now, here are some other big stories that made headlines across the world this week in our segment Globe Watch.
The United Nations says the Syrian government has agreed to allow aid into the besieged rebel-held village of Madaya amid reports of residents starving to death. The UN's World Food Programme said that if access was secured, trucks could begin to arrive by Monday. Aid agencies say conditions in Madaya near Damascus are extremely dire. Nearly 4.5 million people in Syria live in hard-to-reach areas, including nearly 4 lakh people in 15 besieged locations who do not have access to the life-saving aid they urgently require. A massive truck bomb explosion near a police base in the western Libyan town of Slitin on Thursday killed at least 60 policemen and wounding around 200 others. 67 bodies have been extracted from the debris so far. Libyan officials said they believe there might be dozens more bodies. The police base, where about 400 recruits were training, was used by Libya's border police. No group immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, but the modus operandi points at a local Islamic State affiliate that has been trying to gain a foothold in the region. Mexican authorities have formally charged 3 people, including a teenager, with homicide as it probes the killing of Temixco Mayor Gisela Mota. Mota was killed on 2nd January, just 1 day after taking office. 2 other suspects were killed in a shootout on the day of the murder. Authorities suspect that the drug gang known as Los Rojos killed Mota because she backed a plan to place state and municipal police into a unified command structure.
Well, let's now shift focus to the world of sports and bring you some big news from the sports arena in Sports Action. Rafael Benitez has been sacked as manager of Real Madrid after just 7 months in charge, with club legend Zinedine Zidane replacing him. Spaniard Benitez was relieved of his duties following a meeting of the club's board on Monday. B-team coach Zidane has been made first-team boss, but the length of his contract has not been made public. Benitez's final game was Sunday's 2-2 draw with Valencia, which left them third in La Liga, 4 points behind leaders Atletico Madrid. In form, Romelu Lukaku scored a late goal to help Everton outclass Manchester City 2-1 in the Capital One Cup semi-final first leg at Goodison Park on Thursday. Defender Ramiro Funes put his side ahead at the stroke of half-time before City winger González Jesus Navas levelled the score by smashing an equaliser in the 76th minute. It was just 2 minutes later when Lukaku netted the match-winning goal for his side. The second leg will be played on the 28th of January. South Africa batsman Themba Bavuma created history on Tuesday as he became the first black South African to make a Test century. Bavuma, raised in a poor township in Cape Town, gave South Africa a feel-good moment after the pressure they had been under right through the series. The 25-year-old suggested that English sledging helped him reach the landmark. Bavuma was playing his 7th Test and his innings will be a major boost for South African cricket as the authorities try to ensure the racial makeup of the team is more reflective of the country's society. Hashim Amla resigned as South Africa captain immediately after his side drew the second Test against England. The 32-year-old had been in poor form but made a double century to inspire his side's fight back after England made 629 for 6 declared in Cape Town. After his appointment as successor to Graham Smith in June 2014, Amla captained the world #1 side in 14 Tests. AB de Villiers will lead South Africa in the third Test in Johannesburg, which starts on the 14th of January. And finally, we are well past the Christmas season now, but in Georgia, thousands still take part in a charity procession called a Lilo, also called Orthodox Christmas, as it is accompanied by carols. During this traditional march going back centuries, donations are collected for the poor. I'll leave you with these visuals. See you again next time.